going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 4 live stream for the Houston Open. Going to get you guys ready for all of your showdown lineups with a look at the weather report, any player deep dives that you guys want down there in the chat, some shots gained metrics, a little lineup construction, even a look at some of the contests that they have available for tomorrow to round out your process and give you a game plan to go out there and attack some exposure. But wherever you are, I hope you're having a fantastic Saturday. Your round 3 lineups, I hope they went well for you out there in your lineups, as well as any other exposure that you got to as well. We got Alan down there already, also Nick and Steven as well. I appreciate the kind words, Alan. Welcome on in, Nick and Steven. And it looks like Nick has a few sweats going on as well. So best of luck out there for everything that you've got going on tomorrow. And here in this video, we'll try and make it even better from the showdown perspective. We got a Minwoo Lee outright out there with Nick as well. So yeah, I'd probably fade him if you're trying to take a little bit of a self-hedge against that sort of thing. Go collect down there as well as a Garth down there. Best of luck over there with all of your exposure for tomorrow. But we're going to start it off with a look at the golf course from today and what to expect with the weather for tomorrow, which today played a little bit harder than what you had for round number 2, which is mostly because of some tee boxes being moved back. Also, a few pin locations that were tricky out there for moving day. And round 4, it's going to be a lot of the same. They try and tip out the golf course out there for the final round, and they also use the trickiest pin locations out there on Sunday usually. So this minus 1.9 scoring average might go down to like minus 1.75 per round, but I'm not expecting it to change all that much because of the kind of weather that we're expecting for round 4. It'll be threesomes off of both tees. So just like you had out there for Saturday, they're going with the same start time. That'll be 10 a.m. local time over there in the central time zone. And the tee times being so close together is not going to lead to a massive weather edge. Now, the one thing I will say is that the winds do look to kick up a little bit as the day goes on. You can see the sustained winds get a little bit stronger out there towards the mid to latter half of the afternoon. Wind gusts, they go up like 2-3 miles an hour as the day progresses. And, it might be a slight advantage to go out there a little bit earlier. On top of the winds, you also have the course, which will get firmer as the day goes on. But you're talking about the slightest of all edges. And on top of that, right, we've got the placement points in play out there for Sunday. So it's not anything you could go all in on anyway. So the threesomes kind of ruins any sort of that weather edge out there, as well as all the emphasis out there on the top end of the board. The other thing we like to focus on is creating a proper player pool. We're going to talk about the placement points, how to handle that when we get to the lineup construction segment. But before you even get to that section of your process, you should have a good idea of what you're looking for out there in players. And just like rounds 2 and 3, you shouldn't just be picking names out of a hat and trying to find the right guys. You should have a process for going out there and finding your top options. For me, it's finding some ball strikers, guys that were popping out there from round number 3. I like taking a look at some course history players. I mentioned short game regression out there yesterday as well. All of those are still going to be incorporated into my process, just with the added caveat that a few extra players are going to sneak their way in because they're towards the top end of the board. With those extra points you're getting for finishing, especially in that top 5, top 10, you're going to want some extra exposure at that portion of the board. So you take a lot of the fundamentals that we've worked on the last few days, you add that little factor on top, and that's your recipe out there for Sunday. So in terms of our round 3 stats, I like to start over there with the ball striking, just like we have the last few days. And your number 1 ball striker today was an Alejandro Tosti. He sits at 2nd currently, so he'd be a pretty good guy to use for placement points. And he also lost in the 2 short game categories. So I've already posted on my Twitter that I'm playing an Alejandro Tosti. Same thing with a Ryan Gerard down here. And you'll see that he has the same kind of stat profile where he gained in both the ball striking categories, but lost around the green with the putter. So, starting in 2nd, Ryan Gerard starting in T3 down there are going to give you a lot of opportunity to get those top 5 placement points if they can go out there and have themselves a round. Now, this isn't a US Open. This isn't a PGA Championship Sunday round, but the scoring average might be like 2.5, 3 strokes over par. Scoring might be 1.5, 2 strokes under par out there for tomorrow. You're not going to get away with making the optimal lineup by just going out there and shooting like even or -1. So even if a Minwoo Lee, for example, right, goes out there and wins this golf tournament, that does not make him a shoe-in for the optimal lineup if he's only shooting like that even -1 that I was talking about. You likely need at least -2, -3 in the winning score to go out there and make that top 6. And if you're somebody that's finishing in the top 5, right, not getting those full placement points out there for first place, you probably need to be shooting at least -3, -4 to have any chance at all, maybe even -4, -5 to have any chance of making that optimal lineup. So, right, it's not enough to just be towards the top end of the board, which is why I'm still using those DFS fundamentals that we've talked about the last few days to try and find plays like a Toasty and a Ryan Gerard. And like I mentioned before, I already spilled the beans on those two over there on my X/Twitter, which by the way, if you guys don't already follow me over there on X/Twitter, I'd highly recommend that you do so, because I post a lot of extra information over there, especially when it comes to weather and conditions before the round starts. The other good ball striking poppers would be a Kevin Yu towards the top, the same Velamaki, a Jesper Svensson, all top 4 in shots gained ball striking today. Mackenzie Hughes, another guy that lost putting but was really good out there from tee to green. So another player that is out there in my player pool personally. And I've already ran all my projections, so I have a really good sense of what this slate is going to look like. So if there's anyone that you guys are curious about out there from the ownership perspective, I know the SHIPIT Nation slate doesn't quite have projections posted quite yet, but I did run the ones myself over there for my page that I run. So I can give you guys a general idea out there of ownership on players. Guys like Toasty, guys like Ryan Gerard that are starting in that top 3. I've got it at least 15 to maybe even 20% ownership, if not above that, in some of those single entries and smaller field GPPs. So, they're going to be chalky. These guys you're taking up there towards the top, but you kind of know that ahead of time when you're playing a Sunday Showdown slate. And that's why you have the other spots in your lineup to go out there and get different to the rest of the field. And I will also say that if you're playing a Toasty or a Gerard as a placement point player, then maybe you only use one or the other, right, out there for tomorrow, because if you have two really chalky guys down there in that 7K range, it's limiting your options for some leverage down the line. So that's why I might be a little bit opposed to playing those two together. Guys like Davis Thompson, Ryan Fox, Ryder, Minwoo Lee, and Hayden Springer also had pretty solid ball striking days out there. Minwoo, maybe a little bit of a worse ball striking day than you would have expected for him going out there and shooting a -7 round. And then I also like to take a look at some of the short game stats as well. So these guys that gained a whole bunch of strokes over there with their putting, it is unlikely that that is going to happen multiple days in a row. Like, for example, Wyndham Clark lost 1.8 strokes putting out there yesterday. Today, he gained 2.2. So it's an extremely volatile portion of the sport. And it's not even just this putting category, but same thing with around the green. These guys that were spiking out here in these two categories, it's not like it's a massive red flag where you can't play somebody that went out there and spiked in these two categories. It's just that they better have not carried themselves and done nothing else, right, out there with their stat profile. Like, for example, Jesper Svensson, he still gained off the tee and out there on approach. He's not out of play just because he went out there and gained 3 strokes putting. But a Harris English, for example, that lost nearly 2 strokes over there in approach, I'd be a little bit more sketched out about out here with these short game poppers. So you can see the top end of the list there. All these guys may be getting a slight downgrade out there in my process. But I will say that of this maybe like top 10, top 15 over here on the right side, that there's maybe, I think it's 3 guys that I'm playing up there towards the top end of the board that did have a pretty decent day putting. Over here with the around the green category, the same thing applies. Guys that got a little bit lucky over here likely aren't going to do it multiple days in a row. So for example, a Minwoo, a Patrick Rogers, who gained across both categories, they're probably due for a little bit of short game regression, and not the good kind that we're looking for, right? The good kind of regression that we're looking for is the exact opposite. Guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes in these categories that are maybe due for a little bit of regression. Now, Riedel certainly due for that with his back 9 was just horrendous. I believe he shot like a 42 to 45 out there on his last 9 or so holes. He's probably not a bounce back candidate because of just how terribly he looked out there today. But a Kevin Yu could be, right? He's had a round this week where he gained over 4 strokes putting. He also lost nearly 3 strokes out there in round number 1 and lost over 3 out there in round number 3. So if the trend holds, right, lose a bunch, gain a bunch, right? Lose a bunch. And then what happens in round 4? Hopefully he goes out there and gains a bunch putting, because I'm using him out there in lineups. Iron play was electric. And sure, yeah, he had the 1 hole out eagle today that is going to give him a whole bunch of that approach play, but that wasn't everything, right? He still gained a little bit over 2 strokes approach outside of that 1 shot. Guys like a John Pock, he was a player that really hit the ball well out there for round number 2. Kind of disappointing that he lost so many strokes putting, but he's done that 2 days in a row now. So somebody that I would argue is due for a little bit of short game regression. Jackson Suber, he gained across both of the ball striking categories and then lost there around the green with the putter. Another guy that I'd expect to have some more success the next time around. Tony Finau over here, of course, a really good course history player. Partly a reason that you can go out there and even want to play him out there for Sunday, right, if he has that kind of track record, but also decent tee to green, nothing great, right? About neutral in those three categories, but lost all of his strokes with the putting. About 2 strokes over there on the greens is likely not going to happen all that often. So just like the guys that gained a bunch, you kind of got to hold it against. The opposite is true as well. So with the around the green, you can take a look at some of the super negative guys there as well. So Emiliano Grillo, likely not going to lose 3 strokes around the green that often. Sahith Theegala, likely not going to lose 2.5 strokes short game that often between those 2 different categories. All different players that I'm at least giving an extra look or two out there too. And like same thing with the Pendrith over here, right? Like he lost a bunch around the green. If he's a neutral tomorrow, that kind of makes up for the iron play that you saw out there for round number 3. And if you can flip that iron play back around like what you saw out there for rounds 1 and 2, Pendrith could be in a really good bounce back spot. So that's how you use the shots gained metrics to your advantage. The other thing that you can do out there for round 4 showdown is to take a look at the event as a whole. So you don't just focus on there at round 3. You can take a look at some of the full event stuff as well. And towards the top end of the board, you can see over here with Minwoo, right? He's gaining close to, actually, I think a little bit over 10 stroke short game. That reeks unsustainability, right? Doesn't feel like he's going to do that for all 4 rounds. Guys like Scotty Scheffler gaining 5 strokes putting. That feels a little bit unsustainable. Gary Woodland gaining nearly 6 strokes over there on the greens. We know that he's not the most consistent putter out there on the PGA Tour. All trends that you might want to at least put in the back of your mind before you're going out there and building lineups. I'm going to catch up on chat afterwards. We're going to go through some of the contests that are available, as well as some of the other stuff out there too. So where'd we leave off? Said, thanks for the shout out, Nick. Yeah, go collect. He was giving you the shout out early on about being there before you. I think that says a lot about you being early to the live streams. He said, nice call on Nat playing well. Doubt he catches Woozy though. Yeah, I don't know if you were expecting him to win or anything out there from that spot, but yeah, dude, he's playing well for sure. And I have him a lot in my lineup, so I'm glad about it. You said you had Minwoo for one and done this week. Good call, dude. Hopefully he holds on for you then. He said Minwoo has to be a fade doing too much with the putter. He's a fade if you don't believe in the flat stick. So personally, for somebody like me that has plenty of exposure for main slate, I'll be fading him out there for my Sunday Showdown lineups. My process is to avoid guys that are getting lucky with the short game and also to self-hedge when I can when I have that kind of exposure. And I've got 55% Minwoo this week, so it doesn't make sense for me to go out there and force him in once again, right? Like if he goes out there and he smashes, that's great out there for a main slate exposure, and it'll set me up well for a potential bink this week. If he doesn't go out there and smash, then that's really going to be helpful out there for my showdown stuff. So I'm not always somebody that goes out there and does that, but I'll be doing it out there for tomorrow, especially with all that putting and around the green. It's just 9 strokes in those 2 categories is something you don't see very often. You didn't catch if it was lift clean in place. You assumed it was. It was. And for Sunday, I would say that it's probably 50-50 once again on whether they go with it. But we'll have to see what they decide to do. Minwoo is plus 1.8 on tee to green on the events. Yeah, he's doing it all with the short game. You can see over here, this is the full event stuff over here. Decent tee to green stats, but a lot of that is the around the green, right? If you just take it down to your ball striking, he's gained 3 strokes ball striking, which is a little bit over a stroke per round. It's decent, right? You've got to gain ball striking if you're going to win a PGA Tour event, but you know, you'd be crazy to not look at that 9-stroke short game, which is 3 strokes per round right there. That's obviously what's been carrying his game, not the ball striking categories. You feel like Maverick's due for a nuke round, but you've been chasing it since Friday. I'll be playing him as a high upside play, Nick. So there are a few guys that you still want to mix into your player pool, by the way, that have no chance at placement points. Like Maverick, an example, I believe he's -5 as of right now, but you still have to shoot -4, -5 to get to the optimal lineup. And somebody like Maverick that's going to be overlooked by a lot of the masses, not going to be highly owned out there in really any contest for tomorrow. I mean, if you hit on that sort of player, you're getting them at next to no ownership, tons of leverage out there versus the rest of the field, and it's still Maverick McNeely, right? You got to remember, like, for example, let's say that Scotty was like +1 at this point. Never going to happen because Scotty's too good to let that sort of thing happen. But let's assume Scotty was +1 and like 10% owned out there for tomorrow. He could absolutely be the nutted showdown play. If he goes out there and shoots like a -5, you can say the same thing about guys like a Matt McNeely. Now, he's not God mode Scotty Scheffler, but he's doing himself a good job. Yes, he might be that for tee to green, but he's almost 3 on shots gained putting. Yep, just with the feedback there for Jordan. Yeah, honestly, tee to green, that used to be a stat that I heard a lot from people on YouTube, but ball striking is where it's at. Tee to green is, I don't understand why it's a thing. It just ignores putting. I'd much rather look at the ball striking stats to see how somebody's hitting it. Deep dive on Dietrich seemed like he couldn't buy a putt today. I think you're spot on with that, but I'll bring up the stats just to confirm. You can see over here for round 3 specifically that he lost around the green. He actually wasn't that terrible on the greens. He was about 0.5 into the positive there, but he could definitely have been a little bit sharper in that category. Only making 4 birdies on a day where the birdie average was like 4.25 per round isn't going to get it done for Showdown for sure. What's Grillo and Thagala look like? So Grillo looks good stat-wise, so that's half the reason I'm playing him. A little bit of short game regression that you would be calling for here. He gained off the tee, gained on approach today, and then lost 3 strokes around the green, so I'm all for playing a Grillo. Thagala doesn't look quite as polished. He was a loser across the board today, but just like you had with Grillo, he's not going to lose 2 strokes around the green that often. In fact, he's one of the best short game players on tour, and he also lost on the green, so he's a lower owned kind of flyer play that you would be looking at. Grillo, still a low owned play, but maybe a little bit of a more stable shots gained profile there. How about a Rory backdoor top 5? I could see it. He's certainly capable of pulling it off. He does it all the time for us, right? And he's at T14, so he's like 2-3 shots off of that top 5. Stat-wise today, he did everything but putts. Off the tee could have been a little bit sharper, I suppose. He only hit 38% of his fairways. But if he cleans that up, which you'd expect for one of the best drivers of all time, even if he is just a neutral over there with the putter again, that's a lot better than what it was for days 1 and 2. Day 1, I believe he lost like a stroke and a half putting. Day 2, he was able to go out there and gain with the putter. Today, right, was a little bit mediocre. So maybe it's that same trend where it's like mediocre, plays well, right? Mediocre, then goes out there and gets it to work out there in round 4. If he does that, continues to hit the ball like he has all week, I really like how he's setting up. Where we leave off. Nick, you've been riding Maverick 2 and just isn't putting like he's used to. I agree with that, by the way. But putting can come around at any point, so I wouldn't completely hold it against him. Jason Day and a Trevor Cohn deep dive. So Jason Day, was not expecting to see that name, which probably means he's going to be super low owned. He gained around the green and then I guess off the tee too, and then lost on approach play and with the putter. If you take a look at his stats for the entire week, it's pretty much the same exact thing. He's a real ugly play. I will never say never out there on a player on the PGA Tour, but this is like a GPP only sort of play out there with Jason Day. Like you're using them if you need to differentiate yourself in a contest and maybe you have a little bit more chalk than what you're hoping for. Trevor Cohn, he lost on approach, he lost with the putter, then gained off the tee. For the entire event, has been much better with the ball striking. So I kind of like a Trevor Cohn as like a super low-owned flyer play in a GPP. Like you could play him at 7% of lineups and you're probably going to have leverage on a Trevor Cohn. You're not going to get any placement points starting over there at T64. But what you are going to get is somebody that's hitting the ball well, about 3 shots gained ball striking, which by the way, is about what Minwoo has done this week, right? He's gained just over 3.3 strokes ball striking. Trevor Cohn has gained almost a little bit over, actually, 3 strokes himself. Just, get the short game to cooperate even just slightly out there for tomorrow, and he can have himself that -3, -4 rounds, which for a 6K range player like a Trevor Cohn, he shoots -4 tomorrow, and you'd be absolutely thrilled about that sort of round. And it would open up the salary to be able to play maybe a Scotty Scheffler and then maybe even another 9-10K guy on top of that. So if he wanted a Scotty Scheffler Minwoo lineup to go out there and start, it's a 13K guy and a 10K plus player over there with Minwoo Lee. You're going to need guys like Trevor Cohn to make that kind of thing work. Oh, we got hopes and dreams down here. I think you're having a good night. Me too. Cheers to you out there. Molinax for the W. I don't know about that prep, but I think he's in play as a showdown play for sure. What's going on, Brian? Cheers to you. He said you forgot. Thank me for the Goddard up call. Hey, appreciate the kind words there, man. And pretty solid performance. Nothing earth-shattering or anything like that, but we'll take it at that price tag. Talk me out of locking Scotty. Well, to talk you out of locking somebody would be just to call you a donkey for doing so. There's no reason to do so. Scotty's going to be like 25 to 30% owned, mostly because like I have 40% ownership going to a Minwoo. So I'm expecting him to be by far the most popular guy towards the top. You don't even need to lock Scotty to get that leverage. So to talk you off of it, the pushback would be that 50% would probably be enough, right? 50, even 60% out there in your exposure. And then you could still fade Minwoo out there in some lineups, maybe even fade Scotty Scheffler too. And hell, who knows, maybe even throw in Rory right out there into a few lineups, because I've got Rory at sub 15% ownership with so many people playing Minwoo than anyone, right? Scotty's towards the top too. So you're going to get some people like 25, 30% that play Scotty Scheffler. no one's really going to take a Rory. So maybe you could use him for some leverage too. That would be the argument against locking him, right? Is that you could take a little bit more of a well-balanced approach. That's what I'm going to do personally. I'm going to have a few more guys towards the top. More of a week-long question, but I know how many times Scotty's been in the winning/optimal lineup. Seems like he's been a great fade so far at the ownership and price. Well, the question needs to be over what sample size, right? Run the bases, because in terms of being the optimal play over the last year, since this exact time last year, it's probably been 20 times that he's been in the optimal lineup. Maybe not quite 20 times, but it's been at least 12 to 15 times that he's been in the optimal lineup. All of those 7 wins, you had to have them out there for the optimal. And then you'd figure some of those top 5s on top of that, probably 5 to 10 of those, right? He'd also make the optimal lineup. You'd have to know the sample size, right, to answer that sort of question. So no, I don't know that off the top of my head. And maybe this year, the last 4 or 5 events, he's been a decent fade, but not for the last year. If that's your take on that, then you're just wrong. You got to look at last year especially. Day is going to use his Sunday to work on shots for the Masters. Fade, no chance at anything. Anytime somebody says there's no chance at anything, normally it happens. So, no shade to you, Robert, but I wouldn't say, I never say never, as they say out there. His thoughts on Celinda and Mike Kim both seem close, but couldn't get the floodgates to open. Yeah, Mike Kim, I thought he was a decent play today with some of the ball striking stats that we saw out there in round 3 specifically. He did his thing on approach as you'd expect, and then the putter was about a neutral. I'd put this kind of stat profile like a 6.5 out of 10. It's solid to see the iron play. Could have been better off the tee, though. And putting, it wasn't like it was a massive positive or a massive negative. We'll see which way it goes out there for Sunday. And then the other one was Celinda that you wanted me to look at. Celinda, by the way, perfect course fit here. Bomber really fits the style of golf course. Stat-wise, though, was a little bit putter dependent out there in round 3. Rounds 1 and 2, it was the ball striking that got it done. You can see gained over 3 strokes ball striking round 1. Yesterday, gained over 1.5 strokes ball striking. So I wish that it would have been a little bit more of that out there for round 3, but he's not the worst fit. Especially if you're looking at the entire events, right? Over the entire event so far, it's 5.5 strokes ball striking, slightly negative in the 2 short game categories. He's definitely an option, especially with the whole event sample size. You love Celinda and Kim. There you go. Locking for you is over 50%. Locking for me is 100%. Okay, you're talking the season so far, but yeah, I don't have that off the top of my head. Run the bases. I will say that you can fade him out there in your lineups, but he gets there a lot more often than not. So, by the way, if you want to look that up, you can look at some of the optimal lineups for every single event on a lot of different tools out there. You have the Roto Grinders tool where you can look back on a lot of different contests. You have, I think, Establish the Run has some sort of tool over there too, where you can look at the optimal lineups. If you want to do that kind of research, there are tools out there that you can do that for, but I don't have that off my top of my head. I don't know anyone that does, right? There's just random sort of stats. I'm not Justin Ray. I don't just pull shit out of my ass. Or he could. That is definitely true. Let's see. Prize Picks has sucked with their golf options starting 3 weeks ago. They just put in negative EV props. Yeah, they've been doing that for a while, man. Heck, even all these prop sites, that's what they've been waiting. Usually they were posting prop boards before they'd actually post on DraftKings and FanDuel. Now they wait to post the prop boards until after they have the odds to go off of. So yeah, kind of unfortunate, but that's not even just been the last few weeks, man. That's been the last year and a half out there with golf betting. So unfortunate, and I empathize with you for sure. Let's look at some of the contests that are available, which are a little bit bigger than what you had for the last few days. So this 555 is $120K to first place. Still super top heavy, but it is a little bit larger when it comes to some of your payouts. This $20 GBP is also super top heavy. It is a third over there to first place. So you're not going to see me max entering that unless I really have a gut feeling about any given slate. But this 4-entry $250 is always a pretty good option if you're looking to, get a little bit more higher stakes action out there for any given slate. It's not the super high stakes or anything like that, but if you're entering $1,000 out there for a showdown slate, this sort of 4-max is never a terrible option. Still a little bit top heavy, but it's not quite as large as that big $20, right? Not entering against 9,000 other people. It's just a couple hundred other people that you have to go out there and enter against. And I will say that in this 4-entry max, I've entered only 2 or 3 lineups before, but I don't always go out there and max enter it for all 4. You've got this $100 single entry, also a little bit of a larger $100 single entry here as well. It's just a little top heavy for my liking when it comes to first place. 25% out there to the spot. Actually, sorry, 20% out there to first place. is normally it's 15%, and I slightly prefer that. You have this 12 max $44 right here. It's also a little top heavy, but you're going to get that in these GPPs, right? If you're looking to get something a little bit more sustainable, something where it's closer to 10% out there to first place, you've got to go down to these like $33 single entries. Something like this is a little bit over 10% out there to first place. A very flat payout structure out there for places 1 through 10. And you can say the same thing about the $12 GPP. So let me see if I can find that. That's this albatross down here. It is 10% out there to first place. And some of the smaller stuff out there, like sometimes they have some $50 GPPs that they're posting out there for single entries. Those are the ones that you want to focus on if you're trying to be more consistent out there with your exposure. If you're okay taking on some, big upswings, big downswings out there with your exposure, the large field GPPs are okay to go out there and play. It just takes a little bit of a different style, right? If you're playing in that big $5 or $20 GPP, you've got to be playing for the top 5 because that's where all the money is out there in these contests. They're so top heavy that unless you're getting one of those top 5 payouts, you're not really going to pay out long term, right? That's where all of your ROI is going to come from. This $5 GPP, I will say, is a little bit less top heavy than some of the other ones. Like the other ones were like a third, a fourth over there to first place. This one is just an eighth over there to first place. So it is actually a lot better than what you have with some of those other GPPs. And you can see the effect on the rest of the payouts, right? They're a lot flatter out there with 1st through 10th, which means you don't have to have quite the nuts to go out there and get your money back. So if I was going to enter a large field GPP, I usually only enter this $5 one anyways. It's more so the price point that keeps me in this sort of GPP. It usually, and it is the case out here for round 4 as well, it is also the best GPP that we have available. When I'm actually going through and building my lineups, the main thing that I'm focusing on with my builds is game theory after I've gotten some placement points mixed in. So what I like to do out here in my process is I focus on the placement points right off the bat. My rule of thumb is to have 2 to 4 of them out there in every single lineup. If you're in the large field GPP, probably closer to like 2 or 3 that you're playing, they're going to be super chalky. But if you're in a smaller field contest where ownership isn't as big a deal, you can have up to 4 guys starting up there in the top 20 out there in a Sunday Showdown lineup, especially when conditions get tough. Now with a -1.5 to -2 scoring average like we're projecting for, you probably don't have to have all 4 guys starting up there in the top 20 because you're going to have a bunch of -4, -5s to get there anyways. So starting towards the top, I'm going to throw in a Ryan Gerard at $7,700. I'm going to throw in a Scotty Scheffler there at $13,000. And I'm also going to throw in a Jake Knapp here at $8,300. So we've got 3 players here. Hopefully a Gerard or a Scheffler wins. But even if Minwoo wins, all I'm kind of anti-sweating out there with a Minwoo Lee is him not shooting -4 and winning. Like if he gets to -21 and he wins this golf tournament, then I'm cooked, right? This lineup, not going to get there, right? Without having a Minwoo Lee. But let's say he finishes at -18 and he still wins by like 2 strokes or something like that. And guys like Scheffler shooting -3, -4, same thing with these other 2 players. They could easily be the ones that you have to have towards the top. So you could still play a Minwoo. Let's say you wanted to be a little bit more balanced with your salary, right? That's really going to save us a lot more salary with our last 3 spots. But yeah, just kind of pick your guys up top, right? Give yourself a little bit of a script ahead of time, right? We talk about that a lot when we're talking about like NFL Showdown, right? Scripting for what you're expecting to go out there and happen. I think Minwoo is going to win this event, but I think he's going to shoot like even par and win it. So I want some of the chasers instead of going to that sort of player. And now for our last 3 players here now, this is where we're going to get all of our leverage. And for the sake of this exercise, we're going to do it for the large field GPPs. So the big 5 or the big $20 GPP for tomorrow, just to show you kind of the extreme with getting leverage. Because in those contests that are a little bit larger than all of the other ones out there for tomorrow, you're going to need the most leverage against the rest of the field. So for our next man in here, I'm going to try and make sure that it's somebody that's a little bit lower owned. And just to make sure that it's somebody that I'm actually playing myself, I'm going to double check with my projections. So what we're going to do here is we're going to throw in a Sam Stevens, who's starting there at -5. Sam Stevens is a high upside player that I'm using from my player pool. That is somebody that's a high birdie percentage player and that can take on the par 5. So nothing really out there with the shots gain metrics from today. Nothing right out there with his placement points. Right, he's T41. He's kind of doesn't matter, right? In those 2 categories, there are going to be guys that I play in the player pool just because of course fit. like a Sam Stevens that you see there. And it's usually some of the leverage players that I'm using for that sort of purpose. Towards the bottom end of the 7Ks, maybe top end of the 6s is where we'd be landing for our next sort of player. I've got a few in mind, but let's go ahead and throw in a Jackson Suber here at like 7,100. He's a player that he could conceivably even give you some placement points, but in my projections, which are separate out there from what SHIPIT Nation does, I've got him at sub 10% ownership. So if he's going to be sub 10% owned, by the way, somebody that was decent out there ball striking today, gained off the tee and on their approach, but lost over there around the green with the putter, he's the kind of short game regression candidate that I'm looking for out there in my player pool. So just have your own process for building and finding your plays, right? You shouldn't be ending up on the same guys as I am, right? Because, I mean, I don't take down GPPs every single time I play, right? I'm not Nostradamus, or I don't know exactly what's going to happen the next day, but I do have a process to go out there and find my plays. And over time, I found that my process has worked out rather well when it comes to my long-term ROI. So I'll be playing a Jackson Suber there. Then for your last man in, you could probably play whoever the heck you wanted to down here towards the bottom end of the board. I will say that there's only a few guys that I'm really playing down there towards the bottom, but we can't go through all 6 together anyways, right? It's against the DraftKings terms of service. So I'll go ahead and leave it with those 5. But as long as your last man in here isn't mega chalk, and even a Lashley or a Mal, which will be a little bit higher owned than some of the other guys down here, I've got those sort of players like at most like 5% ownership. In fact, I've got a William Mal, actually a little bit over that. I got him at like 7.8%. And then I've got a Nate Lashley at a little bit over 5% ownership. So now, even if we went with Mal there at about 8% ownership, you could probably get away with it in the large field GPP because you've got guys like Stevens, a Suber at sub 10%. Even a Nap isn't mega chalky there at T10. And then your last man in here, right? Another sub 10%er out there with Mal. And if you went with anyone else, right? These other guys down here are like 2 to 5% owned out there in most cases, then you are certainly going to be okay when it comes to your leverage. So I show you guys this to kind of show you guys the thought process when going through and building your lineups, and also to show you that when you're getting that leverage, that you don't have to have like 5 leverage pieces in your lineup. Like that's the case for rounds 2 and 3 showdown too. Like you can have 2-3 pieces of chalk if you need to, right? Out there in rounds 2 and 3 showdown. Rounds 4 showdown, where the placement points are in play, it's usually a good idea to have 2-3 pieces of chalk because of that placement points and all of that impact. So if you do so, right, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure that you're very intentional about where you're getting different with the rest of your lineup. Let me see if there's any last second questions. If not, we're going to hop on out of here. So smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content going forward. So we have a question about a Minwoo fade. You said thoughts on Rory, Fox, and Toasty. So that'd be your 3 guys for placement points. I like Toasty and Rory quite a bit. Rory, placement points are kind of a factor there. That's probably not the main reason you're playing Rory. More so maybe for that like -5, -6 round that he has in him if he can find a putter. But I like that. Fox starting up there towards the top. He's an obvious candidate to maybe finish in the top 5. I don't have any massive takes on those 3 other than that I like Toasty and Rory. Fox is kind of like a 5 out of 10 for me. We get the 18 max $10. Ooh, I didn't catch that one before. Good call out there, Nick. That is one of the better contests out there as well. So if we have that one posted, which I'm definitely going to trust my boy Nick if he's letting us know down there in chat, that's one of the best contests that you could possibly enter, which here it is right here. You can see first place is 10% of the entire player pool, and then 10th place is 10% of what you're getting out there to first. So the perfect payout structure that we're looking for. Hughes climbing up the leaderboard. Yeah, we mentioned him the other day as well, huh? I know we had a question about Hughes and somebody asking about Suber. Yeah, I'm glad that Hughes had his resurgent day today, but hopefully he keeps it going, which we had a question about Hughes. I love him out there for tomorrow. Just needs to find a way to make some putts drop. If you weren't here when we were going through the shots gained metrics before, he did everything but putt today, which is just so unlike Mackenzie Hughes. We know he's one of the best putters out there in the PGA Tour, so I'll be tracking that one rather closely. Gerard, I love because of some of the ball striking stats too. So when we were going through the ball striking before, Ryan Gerard, one of the best ball striking days of anyone out there in round number 3. And then the last guy, an Echevarria, I'm at like a 6 out of 10 on him. I like him. He's one of my favorite players out there on tour, but stat-wise, he has been a little bit too putting heavy for me this week. You saw Valimaki and Springer yesterday, but didn't get to them stupidly. Hey, round 4 could be a spot for those two. I will say that Springer is a player that I'm looking to out there in a few lineups. If you take a look at his shots gained profile, it was pretty much everything into the positive, but especially out there from tee to green. And then Valimaki as well. I'm not playing Valimaki myself. but he's got a pretty decent stat profile, right? Gaining over 2.5 strokes approach. Hey, if you didn't get to them today, maybe you consider it for tomorrow. And then, yeah, Thor, is he in play for tomorrow? He's in play if you need a leverage piece. And I'll just say it because, I'm very transparent about the exposure I get to. I'm using him as one of my high upside, high birdie percentage players. So kind of like a Sam Stevens that I was talking about before. There's some guys that maybe don't look perfect out there on paper, but that are very aggressive, will go pin hunting when they're in this sort of scenario. And Michael Thorbjornsen is that sort of guy. So for sure, yeah, using them out there in a few builds. That's all I've got over here for the live stream, guys. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared for all of your exposure. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already gone to it. And of course, check out my prop and betting live stream a little bit later on tonight. Over there on my YouTube channel. Of course, that's over there on the GS Luke DFS YouTube. Of course, over there on my X/Twitter as well. I'll be putting out a little bit of an announcement with when I'll be going live for that live stream. But that's where we'll be going over all the underdog and prize pick stuff, as well as all the matchups and 3-ball bets over there for round 4. So for all of that side, make sure to check out that live stream a little bit later on. But for all my DFS peeps, best of luck with all of your exposure. Whether it's the few of you out there with Min Woo Lee outright bets, that would be pretty sweet to go out there and get across the finish line. Any of your outright betting sweats outside of that, maybe those top 5, top 10s. And then I saw a few of you up there towards the top of some GPPs. Hope to see a few of you guys take those down as well. So best of luck out there with all of that. And I'll see you guys out there throughout the rest of the year.